My name is Olivia Reynolds, and if you told me I'd spend my 5th wedding anniversary sitting alone in a quiet house, staring at my phone in complete shock, I wouldn't have believed you. I'm 32, a marketing exec who's all about planning every little detail. I thought I had everything figured out, but somehow I missed all the signs that my husband, Michael, was planning something for our anniversary, just not with me. For weeks, I poured my heart into organizing the perfect night. A romantic dinner at Costello's, the place where he got down on one knee. Then a weekend escape to that cozy little bed and breakfast by the coast we've been dreaming about for years. I cleared my schedule, took the day off work, found a dress that made me feel confident and beautiful, and I even wrote him a heartfelt letter about where I hoped we'd be in the next 5 years. But instead of celebrating together, I ended up sitting alone at our dining table, the candles unlit, the table set for 2, just waiting. Then my phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. My hands were shaking as I opened it, and there he was. Michael, smiling ear to ear next to his mom Barbara in St. Mark's Square. The caption: surprising mom with her dream trip to Venice. Day 1 of our Italian adventure begins. Posted just 3 hours ago. So yeah, he boarded that plane knowing what day it was. And there I was, still in that new dress, champagne glass in hand, nowhere to go, while my husband raised his glass across the world, not to me, but to his mother on our anniversary. Michael and I met 6 years ago at a business conference in Chicago. We were both trying to make our mark at rival consulting firms, chasing success in our own ways. I remember being pulled in by the way he spoke, so sure of himself during his talk on market disruption. But what really stayed with me was how, after the presentation, he took the time to ask for my opinion and genuinely listened. Most of the guys I dated before didn't really know what to do with a woman who had big goals. But Michael? He admired it. That felt different. Our first date was at this cozy little Italian spot, tucked into a quiet corner of the city. We sat at the same table for 5 hours, talking like we'd known each other forever. I remember how present he was, really there with me in that moment. At least until his phone rang for the 3rd time. It was a ringtone I'd eventually become all too familiar with, his mom's. Sorry, I should get this, he said with a soft smile. Mom's been alone since Dad passed. She worries. Back then I thought it was sweet. A man who looks out for his widowed mom? That had to mean he was a good guy, right? Our relationship in the beginning felt like something out of a movie. He'd plan surprise picnics at the park, leave little handwritten notes in my briefcase before big meetings, and whisk me away on spontaneous weekend trips to cozy little bed and breakfasts. It was sweet, thoughtful, easy to fall for. When he proposed 11 months later at Costello's, slipping a vintage sapphire ring onto my finger, one that belonged to his grandmother, I didn't even think twice. I said yes without a second of doubt. The wedding? It looked perfect on the outside. We got married in the grand ballroom of the Windsor Hotel. But truthfully, I had to let go of a few things I wanted. Barbara, his mother, pushed for certain traditions and I gave in. Like the mother-son dance, which, for some reason, ended up lasting longer than our first dance as husband and wife. I remember feeling this strange tightness in my chest that day. But I told myself it was just wedding nerves. After our honeymoon in Hawaii, life felt like a fairy tale. We moved into this charming, newly renovated craftsman-style home just outside the city. It even had a little garden I'd spend hours in every weekend. Hands in the soil, totally at peace. My career at Apex Marketing was taking off. I'd worked hard, and last year it finally paid off. I became the executive director. Meanwhile, Michael was stepping up at his family's investment firm. Even though his mom, Barbara, had officially retired, she still held a seat on the board. Classic Barbara, always involved. Every anniversary, Michael had gone all out. Our first? A surprise hot air balloon ride. The second, a private cooking class with a celebrity chef. The third, custom jewelry. And for our fourth, a weekend getaway to a luxury spa. So naturally, when our 5th anniversary started approaching, I couldn't help but dream bigger. And he seemed to be planning something incredible. Just 2 weeks before, he looked at me with this playful grin and said, "Keep the whole weekend free. This one's going to be unforgettable." Well, he definitely wasn't wrong about that part. Just not in the way I ever imagined. Barbara Reynolds was the kind of woman who always looked like she stepped out of a magazine ad. Tiny frame, silver hair styled to perfection, and never seen without her St. John knits and a string of pearls. At 72, she ran on a schedule tighter than mine, and her opinions? Let's just say she didn't hold back. She'd been a widow for over 15 years, and since then, her whole world revolved around one person, her son. And trust me, she reminded me of that a lot. Michael was always such a sensitive boy. She'd sigh as she flipped through old photo albums during our weekly Sunday dinners at her spotless Tudor house on the other side of town. He needs women who really know how to take care of him. And those dinners? Yeah, they weren't optional. Every Sunday was hers no matter what. Then there were the Tuesday check-in calls like clockwork. And those long Friday lunches she had with Michael? They'd often spill right into the middle of his workday like it was no big deal. The first holiday season after our wedding was eye-opening. That's when I realized there was this unspoken pecking order in Michael's family, and I definitely wasn't at the top of it. Before we got married, Michael and I had talked about splitting holidays between both our families. Being fair about it. But then, one Sunday in October, right in the middle of dinner, his mom Barbara casually says, "I've already ordered the 20-pound turkey this year. Olivia, your parents are welcome too, if they don't mind the drive." Just like that. No conversation. No consideration. Just a statement. Later that night, I gently brought it up to Michael. I suggested maybe we spend the holidays with my family in Denver this year. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. "But we always spend the holidays with Mom," he said. "She'd be heartbroken if we didn't. It's tradition." That's when I started realizing maybe my voice didn't carry as much weight as I thought it did. No matter how hard I tried to be the picture-perfect daughter-in-law, I always seemed to come up short in Barbara's eyes. Like the time I baked her favorite lemon cake for her birthday. I really put my heart into it. But instead of saying thank you, she smiled that tight, polite kind of smile and said, what an interesting texture. I usually use my mother's recipe with cake flour. Not all purpose. I'll write it down for you sometime." I laughed it off in the moment, but it stung. And Michael? He never noticed. Not the little digs. Not how she'd quietly rearrange our kitchen when she visited. She'd just say, "I'm helping Olivia get a little more organized." As if I was some messy child, not someone running a whole home and a life. It was subtle, but it added up. And I started wondering, was this what married life was supposed to feel like? The first real wake-up call happened on my 31st birthday. I had planned a special dinner, reserved a private room at a beautiful upscale restaurant, invited just a few close friends. I was so excited. But about 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave, Barbara, Michael's mom, showed up at our front door crying. Through sniffles, she said, "My book club got canceled last minute. I was just really looking forward to being around people tonight. I hate eating alone." Before I could even say a word, Michael had already invited her to come along to my birthday dinner. And she did. She came. And she made the whole night about her. She took over every conversation with stories from Michael's childhood. Anytime someone congratulated me on my recent promotion, she'd somehow shift the attention back to something Michael did when he was 6. And then when the cake came out, she told the waiter to dim the lights, because women our age like soft lighting, right, Olivia? She said it with a little wink, but I felt invisible. Later that night, I finally told Michael how I felt. I thought he'd understand, but he just looked confused. He said, "Babe, Mom was lonely and I thought she made your birthday even better with those stories. Didn't you see how much effort she made?" And in that moment, I started second-guessing myself. Was I being too sensitive? Were my expectations too high? I mean, Michael is a good husband in so many ways. And aren't you supposed to put family first? But as I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling while Michael snored peacefully beside me, all I could feel was this quiet ache. Like maybe, in his world, his family, I'd always come second. Over the next few years, something started to feel off. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it got. It was like clockwork. Every time something meaningful came up in our life, Barbara would suddenly have a crisis. And I'm not saying she did it on purpose. But the timing? Always a little too perfect. Like the time I had that big work conference in San Francisco, Michael, and I had planned to turn it into a mini getaway. I was so excited. But out of nowhere, Barbara rescheduled a small outpatient procedure for that Friday. And of course Michael had to be there. Turns out it was just a quick dermatology check, nothing urgent. Still, our plans? Cancelled. Or our 3rd anniversary. I'd booked us a beautiful weekend retreat, something quiet, just the 2 of us. We were barely 2 hours into the drive when Barbara called, panicked about chest pains. We turned right around, worried sick. After a hospital visit and a lot of stress, the diagnosis? Indigestion. Little things like that kept piling up. And as my career started to take off, her subtle jabs became harder to brush off. When I got featured in Business Quarterly for leading a major campaign, I was over the moon. But when I showed her the article, she didn't say congratulations. Instead, she pointed out a tiny typo, then smiled and said, "It's lovely they featured you, sweetheart. I just hope all these late nights aren't taking a toll on your marriage." Yeah, that stung. It didn't happen overnight. Michael didn't just wake up one day and change. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first. Little things. Quiet shifts. But looking back now, I can see how he slowly stopped being the man I fell in love with. This was the same guy who used to stand up for me when others questioned my drive, who used to brag about how proud he was of my ambition. And yet one day he started hinting that maybe I was taking on too much. That maybe I should slow down a bit. And just like that, those supportive words turned into subtle doubts. Then came the constant forwards from his mom, texts about clean eating and finding balance that felt less like caring and more like coded advice for how I should live. It was like she had a direct line to him and I was just watching from the sidelines. At family gatherings, it became even clearer. Michael and his mom would fall into this rhythm, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at stories I'd never heard before. I stopped being part of the conversation and started feeling more like an outsider, like a guest in my own relationship. Eventually, I brought up therapy. I told him I thought it could help us talk through some of the disconnect to understand each other better. But he brushed it off right away. Why would we pay a stranger to tell us how to communicate? We can figure this out ourselves. Except we didn't. Every time I tried to open up, my feelings somehow ended up being too much, or the focus shifted back to his mom and what she needed. I kept trying. I really did. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being our relationship and started feeling like I was the third wheel. Holidays turned into this constant tug of war. Every year, I tried to bring up spending time with my family just once. Christmas, Thanksgiving, even Easter. But somehow we never made it to Denver. Not once. Michael always had the same reply. Mom would be devastated if we broke tradition. No room for discussion. No wiggle. Even the year my dad had a heart attack, I pleaded with Michael to spend Christmas with my family. And still, the best we could do was fly out on December 26th after spending the actual holiday at Barbara's. Like always. When I started trying to express how all of this was making me feel, just opening up about how unhappy I was becoming, I didn't get understanding. I got gaslit. Looking back, that's exactly what it was. You're overreacting. Mom's just trying to help. You're seeing issues that aren't even there. It made me start to doubt myself. Like maybe I was too sensitive. But then people around us started noticing. My college roommate Lisa pulled me aside after a dinner party where Barbara called 8 times yes, 8, and asked, half joking but not really, "Does Michael realize he's married to you and not his mom?" I laughed, but it hit me hard. Because deep down that question had been sitting in my chest for a while. I'd see other couples choosing where to go for the holidays together, building their own little traditions, supporting each other like a team. And then there was me stuck in this triangle where I always felt like the extra one. The third wheel in my own marriage. You know that feeling when you're holding everything in, pretending things are fine but inside, something's quietly building? That was me. I kept showing up with a smile to Sunday dinners, brushing off canceled plans and whispering to myself, this is just what marriage takes: compromise, sacrifice. But the truth? A healthy marriage isn't supposed to feel one-sided. It shouldn't be about one person constantly giving things up while the other just coasts. As our 5th anniversary started getting closer, I made a decision. I was going all in. Not just for the celebration, but for us, for a chance to reconnect and maybe even reset how things had started to feel between us. 5 years felt huge. We'd made it past the stage where so many couples fall apart, where things either grow deeper or start to crack. I wanted this to be a turning point, not just another date on the calendar. So I started planning 2 months ahead. I booked us a table at Costello's, the same place where he got down on one knee and asked me to spend forever with him. And I found tickets to the symphony that weekend. Tchaikovsky was his favorite, and I thought maybe it would remind him of who we used to be. I even managed to reserve a weekend stay at Ocean Mist Inn, that little coastal B&B we'd driven past years ago. I remember the exact moment he squeezed my hand and said, "This looks like it's straight out of a storybook." As we stared up at the old Victorian house with its wild cliffside garden, we felt so close then, like we were living in our own little movie. And I guess a part of me was hoping maybe we could find our way back to that version of us. For our anniversary, I wanted to give Michael something that felt really special, not just another gift, but something that held meaning. So I found this local artist and had a custom watch made. On the back, I had our wedding date engraved, along with the exact coordinates of the place we first met. It cost me almost $2,000, a big chunk of my recent bonus, but it felt worth it. I wanted him to have something he could wear every day and feel connected to us. About 3 weeks before our anniversary, Michael mentioned he had something planned too. He got that little grin on his face, the one that used to make me feel like the only girl in the world. "I've been working on something big," he said over dinner, like it was some secret mission. "This anniversary is going to be one for the books." And just like that, my heart filled with hope. Maybe he was feeling the same pull I was, that quiet urge to reconnect, to bring us closer again. I didn't want anything to ruin the day, so I went all in. I wrapped up a major marketing project ahead of schedule, told my team not to bother me that weekend. I was completely off the grid. And then came the outfit. I spent hours searching for the perfect dress, eventually choosing this deep blue one that matched the sapphire in my engagement ring. I still remembered Michael once saying that shade made my eyes look like the ocean. I wanted to feel beautiful for him, for us, for what I thought we were trying to rebuild. The night before our anniversary, I went all out. Got a fresh blowout at my favorite salon, had my nails done, and picked up this beautiful silver photo frame. I had ordered a second gift. Inside was a black and white portrait of us from a recent charity event. One of those rare photos where we actually looked happy, really happy. Later that evening, I sat down and wrote Michael a letter. A real one. From the heart. I talked about our dreams, the things we'd been through, and how even with all the bumps I was still in this. Still choosing us. I even wrote, "These 5 years have had their ups and downs, but I choose you today and always." Everything felt normal that night. He mentioned he had an early meeting the next day, but promised he'd be home by 6 for our dinner reservation. I remember teasing, "Don't forget to wear something nice." And he smiled, kissed me on the forehead and said, "Tomorrow's going to be perfect." And for a moment I believed him. I went to sleep with this small stubborn hope in my chest. Like maybe, just maybe, our anniversary could be a fresh start. A moment to realign, to come back to each other. I didn't know that less than 24 hours later I'd be standing face to face with a betrayal that would change everything. I woke up alone on our anniversary. Not exactly shocking, Michael usually had early meetings. But when I rolled over, all I found was a scribbled little note on his pillow. "Had to run, see you tonight." That was it. No happy anniversary. Not even a heart next to his name. I brushed it off, told myself I was probably reading too much into it. Still, I wanted to make the morning feel special. I whipped up his favorite lemon ricotta pancakes with fresh berries, hoping he'd at least stop by, or maybe send a sweet message. Instead, at 8:30 I got a quick text. "Meeting running long, had to grab coffee on the way. Enjoy your day off." No mention of the day. No "I love you." Just nothing. But I reminded myself he's more of a big gesture kind of guy, right? By noon I still hadn't heard a word. So I sent a light message. "Can't wait for tonight. Should I wear the blue dress or the black one?" No reply. An hour passed. Then 2. I tried calling his office around 2, hoping maybe he was just buried in work. But his assistant, Jennifer, answered and she sounded totally thrown off. "Michael called in this morning," she said. "He told us he was taking personal time for the rest of the week. I figured you two were out of town or something." My stomach dropped. I thanked her, hung up, and called his cell. Straight to voicemail. Now fully on edge, I called Tom, his best friend. He picked up but sounded weird, nervous. Mumbled something about back-to-back meetings and hung up quickly. That's when the panic really set in. By the time 4 p.m. rolled around, I was already dressed in the new blue dress I bought just for today. I kept checking the time, hoping, overthinking, and feeling pretty anxious. That's when my friend Samantha texted me. "How's the anniversary celebration going? Has Michael surprised you yet?" I stared at her message, trying to come up with something vague but not too sad. I didn't want to admit I was still waiting and hoping. And then ping. A notification from Instagram. It was Barbara. Which threw me because she almost never posts anything. I clicked on it without thinking and my heart dropped. There they were, photo after photo of Michael and his mom, sipping espresso in St. Mark's Square. Him helping her into a gondola. Both of them beaming with Venice's Grand Canal behind them like they were in a movie. The captions? They stung. My wonderful son surprised me with my dream trip to Venice. Day one of our Italian adventure begins. And another. Nothing beats experiencing Venice with the most thoughtful son a mother could ask for. Each photo had a timestamp, each one confirming it was all happening today. The first post? Went up 5 hours ago. That's when it hit me hard. Not just emotionally, I mean physically. Like someone had knocked the air out of my chest. Michael wasn't at a meeting. He wasn't planning anything for me. He had flown his mother to Italy on our wedding anniversary. I sat down slowly on the edge of our bed, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. My thoughts were all over the place, trying to grasp what had just happened. I needed answers, anything to help make sense of this. So I got up, almost in a trance, and walked into his home office. Maybe it was a last-minute change. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. But what I found said otherwise. Tucked inside his desk drawer were printed airline confirmations dated 6 weeks ago. Hotel bookings at the Gritty Palace, no less. And a full itinerary for a 10-day trip through Italy. Venice, Florence, Rome, the works. My hands started shaking as I picked up a folded note written in Barbara's familiar handwriting. It read, "My dearest Michael, I can't tell you how happy I am that we're finally taking the trip we dreamed of. This will be even more special than we imagined all those years ago. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become. All my love, Mom." I just dropped to the floor right there in the office, still in my anniversary dress, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. This wasn't a mix-up. It wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. It was planned. Carefully. Silently. Behind my back. He had chosen to spend one of the most important milestones in our marriage not with me, but fulfilling an old dream with his mother. And he didn't even have the courage to tell me. Not a word. The sun was setting outside our bedroom window, painting the walls in gold, but I couldn't feel any of it. I just stood there, staring at myself in the mirror. Hair curled just right, makeup done with care, wearing the dress I bought for him. And he wasn't even there to see it. That's when something inside me just snapped. At first, I was numb, like maybe I was still trying to convince myself this couldn't be real. But then it hit me hard. A wave of sadness so heavy it knocked the breath out of me. And then came the anger, deep, fiery, shaking my hands kind of anger. I was a mess. One minute I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. The next I was laughing like I'd lost my mind. Because really, how else do you react when your reality feels like a joke? It didn't take long before my phone started blowing up. My friends had seen the pictures. Barbara's posts were spreading fast. "Olivia, call me right now," Lisa texted. "Are you okay?" Samantha asked. And then came the one that made it feel real. "Wait, Barbara's in Venice? With Michael." I saw my sister Rachel's name pop up 3 times before I finally picked up. My voice barely even sounded like mine when I answered. "He took his mom to Italy. On our anniversary," I whispered. "I'm sitting here in a dress I picked out just for tonight, and they're out there riding gondolas in Venice." There was a pause. Total silence. And then Rachel, being Rachel, let out a long string of cuss words that would have made me laugh under any other circumstances. "I'm coming over," she said. No room for argument. She hung up before I could even say a word. While I waited for Rachel to show up, I kept pacing until my eyes landed on Michael's office door. I rarely ever went in there, it always felt like his space, and out of respect I stayed away. But suddenly that respect felt like a joke. I don't know what took over me, maybe it was the shock, or maybe I just needed answers. But I walked in with this strange calm and started digging. Credit card bills. Email confirmations. Calendar entries. I wasn't just looking for proof of this betrayal, I was tracing something deeper. And what I found? It was like watching the truth unravel thread by thread. There was a charge from Tiffany's 3 months ago for something I never saw. Fancy dinner bookings on nights he told me he was working late. But the thing that crushed me the most? Emails. Between him and Barbara. Talking about this Italy trip going back almost 8 months. One line burned into my memory. "Mom, I think we should finally take that Venice trip we've talked about for years. I can move some things around in May to make it work." May. Our anniversary month. He knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. And still he did it anyway. There was one email thread from April that hit me like a punch to the gut. Barbara had actually asked him, "What about your anniversary with Olivia?" And Michael, without a hint of hesitation, wrote back, "Don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. This trip matters more. You've waited long enough. This trip matters more." Those 4 words, they stuck in my chest like ice. That's when it all clicked for me. This wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment. This wasn't him being careless or confused. It was a clear sign of something that had been quietly shaping our relationship for years. A pattern I had been too in love or too hopeful to fully face until now. By the time Rachel walked through the door an hour later, I was sitting on the living room floor, completely surrounded by printed out emails and receipts, like I had built a paper trail of heartbreak around me. My face was still damp with tears. She looked at me, then at the mess around us, and softly said, "Oh honey, this isn't just about the trip, is it?" I shook my head, feeling this odd, almost eerie calm come over me. "No," I said quietly, handing her a folder I'd pulled from the back of Michael's filing cabinet, one he clearly didn't want me to find. Inside the folder were notes from 3 therapy sessions Michael went to 2 years ago. I had no idea he'd ever even seen a therapist. But what really hit me was what the therapist had written. Patient shows deep anxiety related to his mother's emotional needs. Signs of enmeshment. Struggles with setting healthy adult boundaries. Suggests continued therapy for codependency. But Michael never followed through. According to the records, he stopped going after just 3 sessions. I looked at Rachel and said, my voice sharper than I expected, "He knew. He knew something was wrong, and he chose not to do anything about it. He chose this." And as the sky outside darkened and the silence of my anniversary night closed in, something inside me shifted. The sadness started to fade, and in its place came a steady, simmering kind of anger. Not the wild, explosive kind, but the kind that clears the fog. The kind that finally lets you see things for what they are. For 5 years, I had bent over backwards trying to make this marriage work. I lowered my needs. I told myself to be more understanding. I kept shrinking myself just to keep the peace. But now it was all so clear. There were always 3 people in this marriage, me, Michael, and his mother. And somehow I was always the one who mattered least. My first instinct? Pure fire. I wanted to call Michael right then and there, yell, cry, let all the hurt pour out, even if it meant waking him up across the ocean. Part of me even thought about blasting the truth all over social media, just so everyone would know what he did. But that night, as Rachel sat beside me, helping me breathe through the shock, a different kind of clarity started to settle in. "He's already taken so much from you," she said gently, gathering up the scattered mess of receipts and emails. "Don't let him take your self-respect too." The next morning, after she hugged me goodbye and promised to check in later, I picked up the phone and called in sick for the whole week. I'd never used a mental health day before, but this was survival. Then I took a deep breath and made 2 important calls. One to Diane, an old friend from college who's now a powerhouse divorce attorney. The other to a therapist Rachel trusts. Because if this was going to be the end of something, I was going to make sure it was the beginning of me choosing myself too. Meeting with Diane changed something in me more than I expected, honestly. We hadn't even gotten into the legal stuff yet when she looked at me from across her cozy office and said, "Before we talk options, I need you to hear this, what you're going through. The emotional neglect, him putting his mom before your marriage. That's not in your head, Olivia. It's real." And I swear, the moment she said that, something inside me finally let go. Like a knot in my chest I hadn't even realized was there just loosened. For years I've been second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I was just asking for too much. Maybe I was being dramatic. But hearing it from someone outside the chaos, someone who wasn't emotionally tangled in it, all it felt like someone finally gave me permission to believe what I'd known deep down. I wasn't crazy. My feelings were valid. So over the next 3 days I went into full detective mode. I started combing through our finances line by line. And what I found honestly made my stomach turn. Michael had been quietly moving large amounts of money from our joint account into a secret one I'd never even heard of. That was the same money he used to spoil Barbara jewelry, spa weekends, 5-star dinners. He even used it to pay for that romantic Italy trip he took with her. Meanwhile, he was telling me we needed to tighten our belts, that we had to be more careful with spending. All while he was living a double life emotionally and financially. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a broken heart situation. This was betrayal at the deepest level, one that shook the very foundation of everything I thought our marriage was built on. As I sat there going through old bank statements and property papers, something strange started to happen. Right alongside all the anger and heartbreak, I felt relief. Real unexpected relief. Because for the first time in years, I was seeing the truth without all the confusion. I didn't have to twist myself into someone I wasn't just to keep a marriage alive that, deep down, never felt equal. I didn't have to keep questioning my own reality anymore. That alone felt like a quiet kind of freedom. I remember telling my therapist in our second session, "This isn't just about the anniversary trip." I paused, my voice shaking. "It's about finally accepting that I've been married to someone who was never really there. Not fully. Not emotionally." She nodded gently and asked, "What do you want to do with that realization?" Simple question, right? But it hit me so hard. 'Cause I didn't know. I had spent so long trying to make the marriage work. Being patient. Understanding his bond with his mom. Putting myself second. Shrinking my needs. Hoping things would change. But I'd never really stopped to ask the one question that truly mattered. Was I happy? Was this relationship giving me life or slowly draining it out of me? And when I finally got honest with myself, really honest, the answer was clear. Painfully, heartbreakingly clear. By the time Michael was due back from Italy the next week, I had already mapped everything out in my mind. This wasn't going to be a screaming match. I wasn't going to let tears take over either. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Lay out the truth, share my decision, and keep my head held high no matter how hard it got. Diane, my lawyer, had already drawn up the early draft of the divorce papers, but she told me to hold off on filing them just yet. "You want to do this from a place of strength, not raw emotion," she said. And she was right. I wanted to feel steady, not shaken. That night, before he came home, I booked a table at Costello's. It was the same place where he'd once dropped to one knee and asked me to marry him, and the same place I had originally planned to celebrate our anniversary. There was something bittersweet, almost poetic, about ending our story where it had once started. I didn't wear that soft blue anniversary dress, the one he never got to see. Instead, I picked out a black pantsuit. Simple, sharp, strong. The kind of outfit that made me feel like I was finally back in the driver's seat of my own life. I went over my words in my head, getting ready for all the excuses I knew he'd throw at me. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't anxious. For the first time since everything fell apart, I actually slept through the night. No racing thoughts. No waking up with that weight in my chest. Just calm. Like my soul had finally caught up to the truth I'd been too afraid to face. Michael walked in like nothing had happened. Tan from the Italian sun, suitcase in hand, acting like he'd just come home from a boring work trip. "Hey," he said, all casual, like we hadn't just skipped our anniversary. He tossed his keys on the table. The flight was terrible, so many delays. No mention of me. Of us. Of what he'd done. Not even a flicker of guilt. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen just watching him. And for a second it felt like I was looking at someone I didn't even know. "Welcome back," I said calmly. "Did you and your mother enjoy Venice?" That got his attention. His head jerked up, eyes wide for a second, and then I saw it. That quick little flicker of panic. Like he was trying to figure out just how much I knew. "Olivia, wait, I can explain," he said, slipping into that same soft, rehearsed tone I'd heard way too many times. "My mom's always wanted to see Italy, and when the chance came up," I cut him off. "We've got dinner reservations at Costello's. 8 o'clock. I think that's a better place for this talk, don't you?" His face shifted. Confused. A little thrown off. He didn't know what to do with this version of me, the one who wasn't crying or yelling or breaking down. "Costello's? But that's where we..." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice soft but firm. "That's exactly why I chose it." We arrived at the restaurant separately. That was my idea. I needed space, a bit of control over the situation. They seated us at this quiet little table tucked away in the corner, right near the garden. The same garden where, years ago, he got down on one knee with a sapphire ring. Funny how things circle back like that. Michael didn't waste a second. Before the waiter even walked away, he ordered some pricey bottle of wine and launched into what felt like a speech he'd practiced in the mirror. "Okay, I get it wasn't great timing," he said, trying to sound casual. But my mom's been dreaming of Venice for decades since before Dad passed. These crazy cheap tickets just popped up, and I had to grab them. I almost laughed. Really? The lie was so bold and so easy to catch, it was like he didn't expect me to have a brain. But I just took a sip of water, stayed calm, and looked him right in the eye. You mean the tickets you bought 6 weeks ago? I said quietly. The trip you and Barbara have been planning back and forth since December? And just like that, his face cracked a little. You went through my emails? He shot back, instantly trying to flip the script. That's a huge invasion of my privacy. I nodded. Yep. Just like you dipping into our anniversary fund to take a romantic little vacation with your mom is a violation of our marriage. Then, without saying another word, I reached into my purse and laid out the printed emails and bank records on the table. Neatly. Calmly. Let's not do this dance, Michael, I said. Let's not act like this was some last-minute trip. You knew exactly what you were doing. So please just stop pretending. His face turned red, not embarrassed, but angry, and suddenly all that calm, logical talk he'd been giving me just dropped. Mom needed this trip, Olivia, he snapped. You have no idea what this year's been like for her. Her arthritis is getting worse, she's been so lonely, and all her friends are going on vacations with their husbands. She deserved this. We can celebrate our anniversary any other time. I just looked at him for a second. That's how it always is, right? I said, quiet but steady. Barbara first. Her needs, her feelings, her plans. Always her. And then, like it was some cruel joke, his phone rang. I recognized the ringtone. It was her. And just like that, without even glancing at me across the table, he picked up. Right in the middle of our anniversary dinner. Hey Mom, yeah, I got home fine, he said, smiling. He listened, then laughed at whatever she said. I know, the gondolier was incredible. Then came the line that hit me like a brick. Can I call you back? I'm at dinner with Olivia. A pause. No problem, what's up? And right there, while he kept chatting with her like I wasn't even sitting there, I had come into that dinner with this whole plan, a calm, thought-out speech, all the reasons I was hurt, all the things he'd done over the years to make me feel invisible. But watching him once again put her first, even now I realized I didn't need to say a word. When he finally ended the call, barely mumbling a half-hearted sorry about that, I quietly reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope Diane had helped me prepare. I looked at him and spoke softly but clearly. I'm not going to sit here and list every single time you put your mom before us. I'm not dragging up all the birthdays, holidays, and important moments you skipped just to be there for Barbara. Honestly, this anniversary trip, it was just the final sign. The thing that confirmed what I've known deep down for years, but didn't want to face. I slid the envelope across the table, calm and steady. These are divorce papers, Michael. I'm not filing them tonight. I'm giving you a chance to read them first, which, let's be honest, is way more consideration than you gave me when you chose to spend our anniversary in Italy with your mom. He just stared at the envelope. Didn't even touch it. His face lost all color. Divorce? Seriously? Over one missed anniversary? Olivia, you're being ridiculous. It's crazy. I tilted my head and looked at him, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Is it though? I asked. Be real with me. If we stayed married, what would actually change? Would you suddenly draw a line with your mom? Would my needs ever actually matter? Or would I keep sitting here year after year, fighting for your attention like some outsider, while Barbara gets the best of you every single time? He started stumbling over his words, throwing out excuses, promising he'd change, swearing up and down that he still loved me. But even in his panic, something felt off. Like he was just saying what he thought he should say. Like he was checking boxes, not actually fighting for me, for us. And in that moment I knew. Right as the waiter came over to take our order, I stood up calmly. No drama. Just quiet strength. I've lost my appetite, I said. The papers explain everything. It's a fair split. I'll be staying with Rachel while you figure things out. I reached into my purse and laid down $300 bills, enough to cover the untouched wine and leave a very generous tip. Then I looked at him one last time and said, Happy anniversary, Michael. And I walked out, head high, heart steady, leaving him behind with the divorce papers and the bill. The weeks after that confrontation felt like I was floating in some weird in-between. The marriage was clearly over, but I had no idea what came next. I moved into Rachel's guest house for a while. Well, technically, it was a garden shed she'd turned into this cozy little hideout. It gave me the quiet I didn't even know I needed. Just space to breathe, to feel. Michael's response? Completely textbook. First, it was all-out damage control. Flowers showing up at my door every day. Teary calls late at night with him saying all the right things, how he'd change, how we could fix it. He even booked a session with a marriage counselor before I ever agreed to it. Like he was trying to drag me back in before I could even think straight. When none of that worked, the tone changed. Suddenly, it was all my fault. I got this harsh email from him saying, "You never got what family meant. You were always jealous of how close I was to my mom." And wow, that hit. Not because it was true, but because it was so expected. And then came the final blow, his mom, Barbara. She went full PR mode, spinning this whole story to our mutual friends. Rachel called it a smear campaign. And honestly, that's exactly what it felt like. Barbara, playing the innocent, confused mother-in-law who just couldn't understand why her loving son's unstable wife had snapped. It was like she rewrote the whole narrative, and suddenly I was the villain in my own story. So I ran into Barbara at the country club, my friend Samantha said, eyes wide. She's telling people you had some kind of mental breakdown. Like she's really out here acting like the concerned mother-in-law, saying everyone should give you space while you're going through a rough time. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. She wasn't just twisting the story, she was practically rewriting the whole book. But here's the twist. Her little gossip campaign didn't work the way she hoped. If anything, it backfired. People who had quietly watched Michael put his mom first for years, friends who'd never said a word before, started reaching out. Jennifer, Tom's wife, even met me for coffee and said, "We always noticed it, Olivia. We just didn't know how to bring it up." The way he'd drop everything the second she called. Even in the middle of dinner parties, it wasn't normal. Hearing that, it meant more than I expected. That validation pulled me back from the edge during moments when I started questioning myself. Therapy helped too. I kept going every week, unpacking years of emotional knots. And then my therapist put a name to it. Enmeshment, she said gently. Michael never set boundaries with his mother. And instead of fixing that, you were left to bend and make it work. Suddenly everything clicked. It wasn't just me. And it never had been. During the divorce, once Michael finally stopped pushing back, something unexpected started happening. I began to find pieces of myself again. Parts of me that had been buried for so long, I almost forgot they existed. I started going on Sunday morning hikes with this local group. Funny enough, those were the exact hours I used to spend at Barbara's mandatory family dinners. And you know what? Breathing in fresh air, surrounded by people who didn't expect anything from me, it felt like freedom. I also signed up for a photography class I'd always wanted to take. For years, it had just been a dream in the back of my mind, something I told myself I'd get to, someday. That someday finally became now. Old college friends ones I hadn't seen in forever started coming back into my life. Barbara had always made quiet little comments about them, hinting they were childish or not serious enough. Over time, I let those friendships drift. But now, I was reaching back out, and it felt like reclaiming a lost part of my heart. And then, out of nowhere, Michael's aunt, his dad's sister Eleanor, called me. We met for lunch, and she said something that stuck with me. Barbara did the same thing to Richard. She meant Michael's dad. My brother spent his life trying to keep her happy, she told me, and I watched it wear him down. I always hoped Michael would be the one to break that cycle. That hit me hard. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just walking away from a marriage that no longer worked, I was stepping out of a generational pattern. One where love came with conditions. Where peace always meant self-sacrifice. And if I hadn't left, it never would have ended. The divorce was officially done 8 months after that anniversary, the one that changed everything. Thanks to Diane, who handled everything like a pro, and the receipts and records I'd been quietly saving, the settlement turned out fair. I took my share and bought a small but cozy condo right in the heart of downtown. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Close to work, close to coffee shops, close to the kind of life I used to daydream about when things got too quiet at home. That first holiday season on my own, it was weird. A mix of lonely and kind of freeing too. I said yes to Rachel's invite and flew out to Denver, spent Christmas with her and her husband and with my parents. For the first time in 5 years, my dad, who'd been through a scary heart attack, was sitting at the dinner table laughing, telling those big animated stories he always does. And I just sat there thinking, I gave up so many of these moments, just to keep the peace in a marriage that never really felt peaceful. Then, just as January rolled in, something unexpected happened: a job offer. My company wanted me to head up a project in our Chicago office. Before, I would have turned it down instantly. Michael would have never moved away from his mom, and I already knew that. But now I could actually ask what I wanted. And the answer was yes. 3 months later, I was packing up my little condo and starting over in Chicago, a city I've always adored: the art, the architecture, the pulse of it all. It felt like I was finally stepping into my life, not just surviving someone else's. A year to the day after I found out about Michael's betrayal, I took myself out to dinner. Just me, no drama, no pretending. It was this beautiful rooftop spot that looked out over Lake Michigan. I ordered a glass of champagne, watched the sunset melt into the water, all golden and pink, and just sat with everything. That night wasn't about being sad. It was about honoring how far I'd come. The past year had cracked me open, but it also taught me something powerful: love isn't supposed to shrink you. It's not love if it asks you to dim your light or ignore your own needs just to keep the peace. And you know what hurt more than being alone? Feeling completely invisible in a relationship that was supposed to make me feel seen. But sitting there, I felt whole. For the first time in a long time, I trusted myself again: my instincts, my feelings, my right to walk away from something that didn't feel right. I was learning to put myself first, not in a selfish way, but in a "this is what I deserve" kind of way. 3 days later, totally unplanned, I met Jason at a gallery opening. He was a pediatric surgeon, calm, kind, with eyes that actually listen when I talked. I didn't know it then, but he had been through his own messy healing from a toxic relationship. We connected instantly, but we didn't rush. We took our time: two people who had learned the hard way how important it is to protect your peace, to speak up, and to really hear each other. About 6 months into dating Jason, he mentioned his mom was coming to town. And I won't lie, for a second, that old wave of anxiety hit me. I braced myself, expecting the same chaos I'd been through before. But instead he smiled and said, "She's really looking forward to meeting you." But I told her we already have planned Saturday night, and she totally gets it. She'd rather have real, meaningful time together than take over the whole weekend. That moment hit different. Just hearing someone acknowledge that love needs space, boundaries, and respect, it made me realize how much I'd settled for in the past. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a breath of fresh air, like maybe, just maybe, my future could look very different from my past. The pain of Michael's betrayal doesn't sting like it used to. Honestly, what's taken its place isn't bitterness, it's something I never expected: gratitude. That awful anniversary, the one he ruined with his absence, turned out to be the beginning of me finally waking up. Him choosing his mom over our marriage again was the push I needed to stop abandoning myself. Funny how the very thing that broke me became the thing that set me free. And that changed everything. Have you ever caught yourself pushing your own needs aside just to keep someone else happy? Yeah, I've been there too. And one of the biggest things I've learned is this: the moment you start valuing yourself truly deeply is the moment everything begins to shift. That's when healthier, more balanced relationships start to find you. I'm sharing my story in hopes that it connects with you, especially if you're in that space where you're quietly wondering, is this really okay? Just know some of the hardest goodbyes are what make space for the most beautiful new chapters. Promise. Thanks for being here and for letting me share a piece of my heart with you. And if you're going through something similar, I hope you find the strength to choose yourself every single time. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And hey, if you want more real stories about healing, growth, and finding your power again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.